So registration, container, content instance, discovery, subscription, notification, group. So those are the topics that I already briefly explained. So we can go over just quickly. In this slide, I am listing several attributes of those kind of resource or resource types defined in oneM2M specification. That means whenever you send a registration request to the platform, for example, as an AE, then you may be able to kind of fill out attributes, key values in the request, and that's the kind of API practice, let me say, that we can do in Postman or in your code or our sample kind of source code. So that's why I'm explaining some attributes of individual resource types for different kind of capabilities. And the registration, so for the registration, anyways, when we register something, then we will kind of get the ID, or we will kind of decide the ID. And in oneM2M, the ID of each entity and ID of each resource, we can uniquely identify them globally. And this is the similar picture from the architecture 101. So this is one service provider domain, and this one is the other service provider domain. And service provider, they have their own identifier. For example, myprovider.io. oneM2M defines the service provider ID format as FQDN, which is something like this. And then the CSC ID is kind of followed, and AE ID, one of the kind of CSC relative format is like this. So maybe you can imagine a telephone number. So there's the number, and then there's the area code, and there's the kind of country code to make it really globally unique. So something like that. And this is not just for the ID uniqueness of the entity, but also for the resource. So from this side, the resource herein shall be identifiable once we put the service provider ID of this domain. Content and content instance. So I think I already explained what happens when the current number of instances hit the max number of instances from the previous slide deck. And it is also the case for the current byte size, current byte size, and current max instance age, and so on and so on. So depending on the setting that we put inside the content resource that we are creating or we are updating, once the request is kind of processed successfully, then platform having this container resource is managing the container, for example, by the setting as attribute values. So what I want to say here is, when we create a resource successfully, or when we update a resource successfully, then the platform, depending on the resource type, because each resource type represents different kind of features. Container case, this is the data management feature. So once successfully we update, for example, the container resource, then as the kind of part new setting, like the new max number of instances, the platform will manage the number of instances contained in this container. So that is the kind of feature that is managed by the platform, and application, or we suggested. So we just talk to the platform in terms of resource APIs, and platform will do all the things for us. So platform works and we request. And content instance resources. Inside the content instance resource, we have really the really important attribute, which is the content. We put all the, let me say, payload data for our application or services into the content attribute. And we have the other meta information like the creation time or the expression time or the state tag, which is a kind of sequential number. Discovery. So from the previous slide deck, I was talking about the discovery scope. And in this case, this is the kind of filter conditions that we provide or support in oneM2M, and this can be used for the discovery. And the other bullies are a kind of abstracted kind of HTTP example for the discovery. And you are looking at some short names again, like the filter uses equals 1 means I am using these filter conditions for the discovery. That's the explanation for FU equals 1. And so the kind of default kind of keyword appears for the discovery. And the other thing, like the type equals 4. I am looking for a resource type 4. 4 is defined as an enum for content instance. I am looking for the resources list of the resource identifiers for the content instance. oneM2M does not return the resource representation in terms of discovery, and if you are willing to kind of get the resource representations multiple, then you should kind of use the other API. But we are talking about the resource discovery. We are discovering resources and we are getting the response back, which is a list of resource identifiers. And the other option, LVL, means level 1. So this is the level 0, 1, 2. When we kind of send the discovery request targeting to this container. So the discovery target, that's level 0, and the direct children, they are level 1 and then level 2. So you can kind of scope down the discovery scope. And CRA stands for the created after. And there is a tool that we are going to explain in the next session. There's a small tool to get all the short names. So CRA stands for created after. So I'm looking for a list of resources which is created after this timestamp. And this is the timestamp format definition in oneM2M. Year, month, day, and time, minute, hour, minute, and second. Subscription notification. So subscription is the subscription setting for a specific event to get some notification. And there are a lot of attributes, like the most importantly notification event notification criteria and notification URI. This stands for the list of the URIs or the entity IDs to get the notification. And there shall be a specific event that I'm really interested in. So there is the event criteria for the notification. And there are a lot of kind of sub features or additional features for subscription. Let's focus on the criteria and notification URI at the moment. Yeah, and there's something for you to be interested, and we can indicate the notification target in the notification URI, and in the end, by oneM2M convention, you can indicate what kind of serialization format that you want to get is the notification. So if you are willing to get the notification in JSON, then you put the kind of question mark city equals JSON in the end of the notification kind of target in the notification URI attribute value. That's the kind of content type, in short, CT. So subscription, also we can indicate the event type. I gave you a further explanation or the example saying that if there is a container, for example, I want to get some container meta information update, then I would kind of pick target update because the container is the kind of target resource for my subscription. And if I want to get some event notification whenever there is a new content instance, and you should know that content instance is a child of container. So whenever I pick that event type in the subscription resource setting, then I will get the notification for all the child resources. And this is the notification object kind of structure, and you will see the real notification serialization data in the next session. And normally there's the single notification, which is the kind of blue box like this, and there is a kind of best feature aggregation feature for different subscription and their notifications. So theoretically, there is the kind of wrapper for the aggregated notification. Anyways, let's just focus on this blue box, which is the single notification, having several things. The first thing is the subscription reference. When you get a notification, then you should be really interested, or you should be curious, why do I get this notification? What was the subscription that I created so I get this notification? So the subscription reference is the resource identifier of the subscription which is generating or sending this notification. And skip over the other thing, and inside the notification object, single notification, there's the notification event, and there's two attributes or property. The first one is the event type, like this. So I am receiving this notification due to this subscription, and the subscription was set like, okay, this is the event. I said I want to get the child creation, for example, the content instance, and the target update, like the update of the container. I can pick two different types, so not just one, or it can be multiple types for the same or single subscription. So in that case, the notification says, okay, this is a notification for the child creation. So we will understand the representation. How to understand is referred here. And the representation is, for example, in the case of content child creation of the container, I get the content instance resource representation. This is just a kind of abstract representation, and you will see the real kind of serialization information which is complying to the oneM2M protocol in the next session with some kind of exercise. Group. And group is creating a group of resources, and again resources could be the device resources or entity resources, data resources, whatever you pick. And you cannot just create a new kind of resource type, but what I mean by anything is at least the oneM2M defined resource types in the specification. And the reason for creating a group is to access them at once. What I mean is I create a group of kind of 5 different kind of data containers, and I want to get to those 5 different containers with a single request, and I send the request to the group hosting CC, or in other words, group, just easily. And we will gonna get more details in the next session. and there are many attributes, and most importantly, whenever you create a group, you shall provide the member IDs, which is the identifiers of the group member resources. So that is member IDs. Yeah, that's it. Then let's jump to the protocol, because we will be using protocol like the HTTP binding was in most of the cases in our tutorial. Core protocol and protocol binding. I will be explaining what's the difference and why am I talking about that. Firstly, the core protocol in oneM2M TS4 is the core protocol specification, and the protocol covers like the format, or in other words serialization like XML, JSON, CBOL, and also core protocol defines all the kind of error codes, error handlings, and short names. Like I said, container has a short name like the CNT, something like that. And this is the kind of conceptual picture, but this is somehow important. So oneM2M, we defined oneM2M level protocol, but in reality, the oneM2M messages are sent over the other protocol messages, like the application layer protocols like HTTP, CoAP, MQTT, WebSocket, like that. So we create a request, for example, by the originator, and the request will be mapped or converted into HTTP message, and it will kind of be sent to the receiver, and receiver will get the HTTP request, and he will convert it to the oneM2M message, or in protocol we call a message as oneM2M primitives. So request and response primitives. And vice versa, when it sends a response back, then he will prepare the response primitive and it will be converted into the HTTP response, and then it will be received by the originator. So protocol bindings, we support them, and for CoAP, we can say that we support UDP. That's why we basically support the IP, and TCP IP and the UDP. HTTP binding, so basically we bind or we map oneM2M primitive parameters like the request parameters, response parameters to HTTP message, their header and the request line and response line and the body. So this is the example, and don't worry, we are going to do some kind of practice. So for the testing of HTTP binding, you can use the Postman, which is basically the Chrome extension where you can nowadays install a standalone application, desktop application. And I will skip over this one because we will be using it a lot. And this is the Postman UI and the explanation what kind of oneM2M parameters should be mapped into the Postman UI components. For example, the headers will be listed here, and two parameter with the server address here, and the operation will be mapped into HTTP methods. Yeah, something like that. For CoAP, of course, just like the HTTP, basically we provide mapping. So oneM2M parameters, primitive parameters are mapped into CoAP options and CoAP body. And there is a kind of free client for the Firefox add-on Copper for MQTT. Yeah, in the one MQTT binding, there is MQTT does not define the concept of URL, but just the kind of topic. with the topic registration, clients get kind of correspondence kind of messages. And oneM2M defines the MQTT topic convention. That's how oneM2M entities can exchange the oneM2M primitives. So originator ID and the receiver ID for the request, and we of course we have the topic convention for the response. Basically slash oneM2M slash RESP response, and then the originator and the receiver. And we have the other option in the end, but yeah, we will see that later. And for the free client to test MQTT protocol binding, you can use the MQTT lens, and there's the other. So that's it. So I think this is a bare minimum for the other sessions today and tomorrow for different topics, and we are going to revisit the API concepts or the explanations during the practices. So thank you.